All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Good. The first handout I gave you was Coder Revolution. You'll hear more about in the fall. Right now we're using it for the promoting the RVC Hour Code. We have it the last or the fourth Saturday of every month. March is already full. There's some spots left open in April and May. And I'll kind of show you what next is I applied today and the women will like this, girlswhocode.com. Have you guys heard of that website? Girlswhocode.com? It's a 1.5 million women have been through this code training, and they have, the lady who started it has companies like Facebook, Indeed, IBM, Viacom on their board. And what their goal is to create a pipeline of women in coding to not only get them hired, but to make them successful. And because there's a dearth in women programmers, and so it's for all ages. But I signed up for us to become a center for. They have what's called a club that we can create. And they give us all the curriculum, and then I'll just be like the advisor. But I applied for it today. I'm on the last stages of approval. And then probably in the fall, you'll be hearing more about it. But it's Girls with Code. I'll show you. Tonight we're going to go over remote access. We're going to be actually starting, we're going to go over a discussion of remote connectivity. But the lab you're going to do is actually going to be take home. And I did move around some stuff. I don't know if you looked ahead a little bit, but week 9 it showed as being research night. I'm making it week 10 instead of week 9. Because research night is that we don't have class that night. You're just starting your research paper, which I know many of you have already started, right? You're like, yeah, oh yeah. No, I'm not started it. So anyway, I moved it from week 9, which is a week after spring break, to week 10. So week 9 is going to, actually week 10 is going to be week 9, week 9 is going to be week 10. So when you come back from break, we're actually going to be doing a lab where you learn how to set up users in a Linux environment, Mac environment, and Windows environment. So Windows, Mac, and Linux, those three OSs, network operating systems, you're going to learn how to set up. Tonight, though, we're going to talk about remote connectivity. I did put in there all the due dates for tonight. Discussion on remote connectivity, what it's all about. I wrote up on the board some stuff that's just simple bullet points on or information on remote access, what you can remote access. And this is not exhausted, but this is probably 90% of what people do. Servers, clients, and virtual servers will be the three entities. A virtual server would be like a VMware type of server, which is real popular today. But remote access is basically the ability to log in via LAN or WAN to a machine or a server. And tonight you're going to be using the take-home as TeamViewer, which uses a WAN connectivity to do connection. It doesn't use LAN. LAN will be internally only, like VNC is a popular one that we'll play with in a couple weeks. VNC is a real popular remote connectivity software that you can use on a LAN that you don't have to even have internet connection, and you can connect to other computers. A lot of IT departments use that for like help desk and things like that. Remote client can access files, applications, shared resource. Like in TeamViewer, you can drag and drop files from one computer you're remoting into to your computer and vice versa, which is nice. You can also, some of the requirements is a client of some type, usually, a host transmission path, meaning internet medium, VPN medium, wireless, whatever the host transmission path is. Appropriate software, either dial-up networking, Microsoft, RAID server, RAS server, which is a remote access server, or VPNs. And so remote client, remote access, to where you can connect to shared resources fairly easily. So Dialing directly used to be what we would do years ago when we would dial into a Windows machine. You could actually send a request through email. The person would click on the request and then dial into their modem to log in. So you might see a lot of terminology when it comes to remote connectivity, the word dialing, just because it's been around for a long time, even though people technically don't dial in anymore. It's still in the verbiage of things that you read about remote connectivity. Today, you basically just log in to whatever the service is and connect. For this week, we're going to be using TeamViewer, but it could be logmein.com. It could be a number of other, remote software, remote access software. My PC is another one that's popular. So advantages of dial-up networking, though, which is rare but still around in some places, is it's well understood. Software has been around for a long time, so it's available. Disadvantage is slow throughput, slow quality, and there's maintenance involved. Microsoft Remote Access Service, and then routing and remote access service is a popular dial-up networking. Still built into the OS too, by the way, but it does use dial-up, plus it also can use just regular broadband both. Most students aren't aware of the fact that you can, even now, create a remote access session request to send somebody via email. If you just go into Microsoft Help menu, where you can go to the Help menu in your Windows computer and just type in remote access, it'll take you right to the page to where you can start that session request to email somebody to help you. And then it would start the ball rolling. They have to, on their end, when they click on a link, it downloads a small client. They log in with the password you gave them or not. You don't have to require a password if you don't want to, but you usually do it like a start and end time. And then after that end time, they can't log in after that. It's just a one-time thing. But it still does work, but that is an option as well, too, by the way, that people can use. It's not as you'll find out this week, it's not as intuitive as TeamViewer and some of these other remote access softwares, but, it works. I've used it before when I've had to use it. So remote access servers, if you're doing the Microsoft route, can be or Cisco route, can be very intense to the server. Whether it be a Microsoft side or Cisco, Citrix you might have heard of. Citrix is a very, very popular remote access on the Cisco side. You like at least $5 to $10 grand to set up a Citrix server on a small to medium size business. It's very robust though. It's 99% uptime. You control everything. So, road warrior type, where you're needing to access your files all the time, all day long, 10, 12 hours a day, 500 employees connected. That's what it's used for. And that's what it's good for. Would it work with TeamViewer doing it that way? Yeah, but it would be really kind of not as intuitive, because when people use a Citrix client, they literally just double click on an icon on their desktop and they have access to everything on their network like they normally would sitting there on their laptop, if that makes sense. And so it's like creating a tunnel to their computer wherever they're at in the world, could create a tunnel to their network where they have access to all their files and everything like they normally would sitting in their office. So it's a little bit more robust in TeamViewer, a little more seamless, I guess, in TeamViewer in that stead. But TeamViewer is used, we'll talk more about tonight, for, in my mind, troubleshooting, IT-related things, and personal use. That's what it's really excellent for. Not that it can't be used, like I mentioned, but it'd be a little bit, actually, pretty expensive when you're starting to use TeamViewer corporate. It's pretty expensive. It's not cheap. The one we'll be using this week is for non-commercial use is free, but if you look at the prices for corporate use, it can be pretty expensive. And so, companies that don't pay that corporate fee and they're using it for corporate use can get a pretty hefty fine. if they don't pay it. So we got Microsoft, we got Cisco. We also have what's called Microsoft Remote Access software, where computer clients have multiple remote client connections, and the server acts as a router, and there's multiple security provisions within a RAS software environment. You can set up your security however you want to. So here's the clients connecting with a remote access server. You've got basically, we'll start up on the top right here. We could say this is a, let's change the color here. This right here is a local company with their file server, web server, router, data storage. But then they've got a couple, they have one remote access server that folks can connect to via the internet, broadband on the road, or through old school dial-up, either one, and it works. And so clients can connect. These folks on the left, the dial-up person here and these clients here do need to install generally a small client on that device, whether it be Cisco or Microsoft, but you can even put it on your phone too. Like iPhone has a section in there for Cisco Citrix. In fact, Citrix and VPN is exclusive to iOS. Droid is not available on Droid. The VPN technology through Cisco, they signed a contract, I think, through 2030, that they're exclusively providing that service to iOS only. So that's why you've probably seen, it's helped Apple a lot financially, because when companies buy phones to go do international stuff, it's always iPhone and it's always iPads, because nothing else works with Citrix VPN.
VPN is a secure remote access?
Yeah, well, it's just the de facto #1 software that companies use to do VPN is through Cisco.
Yeah,
And
they had a guy, just referring to that Apple thing, a guy on an airplane was using email.
Yeah.
And a guy behind him, when they got off the plane, he said, he knew all about the guy. And the guy was scared, he said, wow, he must have accessed all my email, what I was doing on the flight.
Oh, really?
And he did it like a white hacker, saying, you better get
Okay.
security, because I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I eavesdropped on all your.
Well, that's interesting.
VPN after that. He said he would only use VPN after that.
Yeah, yeah, it's very
It was a
secure.
cheap lesson, he didn't.
Yeah, it's hard to, not saying it's impossible to hack into VPN, but very near impossible. It can be done, but near impossible to do. You almost need the, when you set up a VPN client on like a phone or a tablet or a laptop, they have not only an IP address, but usually a code they have to type in. It has to match IP address and the code, and sometimes even, I think you can even check mark, the latest version has to be the exact MAC address that you want it to be, which adds a little bit more security to it. So yeah, not like 100%, but fairly close, 100%. I would say nothing's 100%, but fairly close on foolproof. Here's some protocols referring to exclusively remote access. SLIP and PPP is the two protocols on this slide. Basically, workstations connect using a serial connection. It's encapsulated with network protocols and in the data link layer. And SLIP carries IP packets only. It's set up through the header file of the IP. It's asynchronous data. And PPP carries different network layer packets. It's automatically set up. It performs error connection, data compression, supports encryption, supports asynchronous and synchronous transmission. And so these are a couple protocols de facto in remote access. Here's what it looks like on the OSI model. RDP, the TCP, IP, PPP we just talked about, and Ethernet, all used for remote access technology. Whether you're connecting from your ISP from DSL, broadband, or otherwise, these are going to be used. Remoting virtually into a computer, some of the comments you guys made about it was it's cool to be able to remote into home, work, be able to do work remotely, be able to see your kids. That's kind of cool, right? Oh, mom's here or dad's here. Oh, hi. So that's kind of cool. And then computer clients basically control the computer host across a network connection. A dedicated WAN link can be set up, internet connection, dial-up, any one of the three. They establish connection between the client and host. The host allows that access to come through. Username, computer name, password, credentials, MAC address, code, a number of different ones you can put in there. There's what's called a thin client concept as well for virtual computing. Is remote virtual computing is where basically it requires very little bandwidth for the thin client type of technology. Advantage of remote computing, it's very simple. Virtual computing, it runs on any connection. There's a single host and accepts simultaneous connections from multiple clients. Remote virtual computing software, the difference on this one is security mechanisms, supported platforms, and examples. I already mentioned a couple of these. Citrix is an example, VNC is an open source example, and Microsoft remote desktops also. Out of these three, the most popular definitely in businesses would be Citrix. Techies and geekies, probably VNC. And then pretty much no one with Microsoft Remote Desktop, but it's out there. It's available. So we have to mention it. So Microsoft has a client called RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, you might have heard of or seen possibly in your Windows environment. And is basically allowed to remote into other clients and servers. If you're doing it on a LAN, you just need to know the protocol on the computer you're wanting to control has to be turned on to remote access. You might have seen that in properties in Windows. If you don't have that unchecked or checked to be able to remote it into that, you can't remote into it. And you just need basically the computer name or IP address. Then it prompts you with a login screen to log in like you normally would if you were sitting in front of your computer. And it does work if it's set up right internally. I've used it quite a bit internally on a LAN because it's already built in. And so all you have to do, like I said, on your Windows side is uncheck it. The problem with that is this, I think. There's been a number of hacks over the years that have hacked into this service, this virtual remote service that Microsoft has. And it's not really 100% sure that there's still not backdoors. And so that's why a lot of companies choose off Microsoft products, right? Like Citrix, like VNC, like TeamViewer, like we're going to be using this week, because of that. Because Microsoft over the years has said they patched it, but a lot of companies don't really 100% trust it for robust business road warrior type of use. Here's what the screen looks like on the allow remote access right here. This has to be checked. If it's not checked, then it's not going to work at all. And you also can not only check the remote assistant invitation here, but you can do the remote desktop, which that's the one that would basically, I talked about earlier, allow you to just type in the name of your computer, and then it would log in, bring your login screen to where you could access it. You could even go further and select remote users and type in people's names that are on the network already that are allowed to remote into kind of a whitelist of only these people can come into my computer, myself and maybe 3 or 4 others in IT possibly. And a lot of times if folks are going to use a server to do this, that's how they'll check it out. But in my experience, this is never used in a server environment. Never. And very rarely used for IT folks to even remote into their own computers because they just don't trust it, if that makes sense. Not to say it doesn't work, because it does, but there's been too much water under the bridge, I guess you would say, over the years of things that have happened that we don't quite know if everything's fixed, okay? Anyway, here's what it looks like when it first if it's going to work, you'll see this. Well, this is the first screen that comes up. You type in the address or the computer name. The address would be the IP address or computer name. Once you connect, you hit connect. If it says failed, it'll usually say in the failed message, make sure you've checked the screen we just went from, remote access or remote desktop has been checked on your client. It'll actually say that. The next one's VNC. Has anybody used VNC? I didn't put that in the little, okay. So you use that. We'll be using what's called Ultra VNC in the lab in a couple weeks. And VNC is open source. I've used it for years. It works great. I think the software I mentioned in week 2, 3, or 4 called spiceworks.com, which I know a few of you have played with. It has a built-in VNC in Spiceworks that as a help desk system, ticketing system using VNC. And basically, it allows you to remote in to a workstation. You can receive screen updates. It's free. Anybody can modify the code if they have access to it. It's totally freely available to download. You can manipulate it to your company's logo and how you want it to look and all that good stuff. And again, it works best behind the firewall in your LAN environment, and it works awesome for that because you're literally just using it to, Joe needs help across the building or whatever, you're upstairs, he double clicks on an icon on the desktop and sends you a connection request. And generally what IT departments do if they use VNC, they have a list of all the computers in their VNC saved list, and they just click on the name of the computer or the person's name in the business, and it connects to that computer immediately. Now, one of the things you can do is with VNC, like a lot of these, even TeamViewer allow you to do this, is you can view only a computer for monitoring purposes, which a lot of times IT departments will do. And if you do a view only, the person on the other end doesn't even notice they're being watched. And so you can do that easily. And so they can be being monitored without knowledge of it. But most businesses, when you get hired, have you sign some type of disclaimer saying, oh, by the way, anytime we could monitor your movement, actions, whether it be computer usage or otherwise, while you're on the clock. Okay, that's generally pretty common. And so most people don't think of that, though, when they're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing on a computer. And so, but this software can be used to do that amongst other ones, even like TeamViewer can do that. This one's a little bit more seamless than that out of the box. Protocols operate on the application layer. Advantages, you can do multiple computer platform operation, meaning you can do this with Mac, PC, Linux. It's open source, single computer support, multiple sessions. The drawback, it's kind of slow on screen rate. The refresh rate, when we do the lab, you'll see it's kind of more choppier and not as smooth as like TeamViewer is, or some of these other softwares, remote access softwares. But it's free and it works great for what it does. The other one is Independent Computing Architecture, ICA. It's the Citrix System Presentation Server. It's proprietary, very easy to use once it's set up, broad compatibility. Disadvantage, it costs a lot of money. It's very expensive. Cisco is pretty expensive in most of their hardware, pretty expensive. But they are the de facto hardware provider for something like 75% of businesses today, roughly. So if you have a medium to large business, they're going to have Cisco somewhere in that business. Probably their phones, probably their Citrix remote connectivity, at least those two they're going to have for sure. Like here on campus, we have Cisco. We used to have 3Com for years, and we switched over to Cisco. And give a little plug for Cisco. Anytime you see anything available for Cisco as far as like voice over IP, there's one we try to offer on the phone voice over IP that I definitely recommend that one. It's a really good class, and if you're going into networking, more than likely you'll be dealing with Cisco phones. And so it's good to know a little bit about voice over IP. It's a cool technology, and you'll be working with it in networking for sure in some form or fashion down the road. So it's good to have that knowledge base. VPN, you've heard of that, virtual private network. It's called a wide area network. It's logically defined over a public transmission system, isolated over public lines, and what that means is your ISPs, it works over fine over any ISP providers. So it could be DSL, AT&T DSL, it could be Comcast. I'm trying to think of one. Fios, I think is the name of it. Verizon Fios, is that right? That's a new one you might have heard of. We don't have that here, but a lot of places have it. To Wi-Fi Max Wi-Fi, where citywide Wi-Fi works over that as well. It's inexpensive VPN as far as the software goes. Now, that's client side. Server side, not so much, but client side, inexpensive. It's sometimes used with other wide sys software and tailored for the customer's needs, bandwidth needs. Two important decisions is interoperability and security. It's not as interoperable as Cisco or VPN, either one. They're kind of made for unique OSs, if that makes sense. VPNs are kind of tailored towards a unique OS. Not that they don't work, it's just that you can find some, and you can find some that are free too, by the way, and open source, which I recommend. And the reason I recommend open source on anything is open source is less hackable, believe it or not, than closed source. Or it's less hacked than closed source. And why do you think that is? For a second. Why do you think open source are less hacked than, or open source is less hacked than closed source? Closed source means your code's not available.
The code's out there for everybody to poke holes in.
Yeah, it's there for me. It's there for everybody to play with already. So the hackers don't have any really need, I guess might be the nice thing to say, or challenge, because they can do whatever they want to with it anyway. Like Linux would be example. And really, if you think about it, even the Mac OS, it's built upon a system that's open source as well. That's probably why it doesn't have as many hacks as it probably could have. Windows is the only one around that's closed source. And so if you look at the three systems I just mentioned, Windows, Mac, and Linux, the one that's hit the most with viruses and hacks is Windows, and that's because it's closed source software. And so even we use Swift now in programming for mobile. It's now made open source as well, where people that program in Linux now can download it for free and use it. And this year it's going to be open for Windows to use as well. And so, Apple knows it's going to just widen their spectrum for developers doing that, but also it's going to lessen their chances. Like you might have heard the term jailbreak on phones, right? Well, those days are gone. You don't need to jailbreak phones anymore because you have everything that's open source and all the resources. You can do anything you want to now on an iPhone with the newest version of Swift. Now, granted, you're not going to be able to publish the app to the App Store, but hackers weren't doing that anyway. They're just, hacking an app and creating something and sharing it with their friends or whatever, right? You can still do that now with iPhones now. They call it side loading, meaning I can create an app on Swift and Xcode and side load it on any device and give it to up to 200 people at no cost. And so that's pretty awesome. And you don't even have to be a programmer to load it. You just need to download the software and install it, and it works. So VPN is a little bit more tailored towards the client. Here's what a VPN system could look like. You got 3 offices in 3 different cities. We got Seattle, LA, Detroit, and Charleston. And it's on a WAN link, you'll notice, and it's traveling on whatever ISP these folks are traveling on to get to one another. It uses a term called tunneling that ensures the data's secure and private, and it has 2 nodes that it connects to, the client that's sending it out and receiving, and then the receiver end, wherever that might be in another office. So 2 nodes, at least 2 nodes for connectivity to work. And it uses what's called point-to-point tunneling. There's Microsoft, which is a big one on that, and it's built into the OS. Doesn't cost any more to use it. dial-up, or the level 2 through Cisco, called level 2 tunneling, connects VPNs using equipment mix on the Citrix server to connect 2 routers, and tunneling what's called packet switch networks. And the bottom one is a little bit more secure and encrypted because it's a very closed system and much more than Microsoft. And there's really not been many hacks to it, believe it or not. And one reason I think is it's used by both IT folks, both black hat hackers and white hat hackers both use this Citrix technology. And they rely on it for the security that it gives them. And so, not to say it couldn't be hacked, I just think it's it's a concept of, do you trash your own house, or do you, keep it kind of clean? You kind of, take care of stuff that's yours a little bit better maybe than somebody else's. So that's the way it's kind of looked upon the IT community, I think. And so they kind of take care of that one and don't really mess with it. Okay, so what you're going to do for your take home this week is you're going to use TeamViewer, which I know, how many was it said they used TeamViewer before? Okay, so that's awesome if only one of you have used it, so it's going to be a lot of fun. So you've got until the 13th to do this, by the way. So what you're going to do in just a second is get with a neighbor, figure out when you're going to do this, and we'll go over the slides in a second. And the slides are about in week 8 lab. And if you've not submitted your name in week 8 lab, go ahead and do that before I forget. Do that before you leave. But get with a neighbor friend and here in just a second. And you're going to figure out a schedule when you're going to do this. And so let's go and go over the slides, and then we'll have you break out and talk to each other before we're done. So basically on number 1, you're going to download TeamViewer at home. And this works, by the way, for Mac or PC, which, does anybody have Linux you have to download to? Okay, so Mac or PC it'll work on. You'll double click on the file to go through the setup process. You'll accept it, keep clicking next, and I accept all the way till it's finished on steps 3 and 4. Once it's installed, you're ready to go, and you're ready to remote control or be remote controlled. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to set up a time and date when you both want to connect to each other's PC or Mac. Decide who is going to be the expert. That's the key thing first. Who's going to be the expert, the person remote controlling, and who is going to be the user being remote controlled. So what you're going to do in the session, once you've set up a time and date to do this, both of you will start TeamViewer. The user will call the expert or text the expert what the ID and password is for that session. Because every time you start TeamViewer, it gives you a unique ID and password, or password every time. So the expert will fire up TeamViewer, type in the user ID, click connect to partner, then type in the password when prompted. Once you're connected, the expert will start Notepad or TextPad on a Mac on the user client. The expert will type into Notepad their first and last name, save it to desktop. The expert will also set their home page to like Rock Valley College or any other website except for porn sites. Can't do that. I have to put that as a disclaimer because I've had that happen before. I've had to put that as a disclaimer because I've had that happen, believe it or not. And you can't put it like hack sites or anything in there. So it doesn't have to be Rock Valley College. It can be other websites. But just kind of, be nice to the person you're doing it to. Then once you're finished, both of you, and you've disconnected, the beauty of TeamViewer is the person that we're remoted into doesn't have to worry about that person coming back again because it's a one-time thing to get into that TeamViewer session, okay? But I have found students that after they've done this lab have kept TeamViewer on their machine because you can set up TeamViewer to where it's used for you to remote into yourself thereafter. That's what I recommend to do because you can use it once it's installed. There's a setup part that asks if you want this to be set up as an unattended machine, meaning it can be remoted outside of that house or business from an iPhone, a Droid, a laptop, desktop, like some of you have done already. And then you just download that TeamViewer app on the phone, iPad, tablet, and put in your credentials, and you'll see your computer there. In fact, let me show you real quick before I have you go further.